the Azerbaijani side has chosen the path of war.
It seems as if you're not signaling that you're serious about peace.
Excuse me, I cannot agree with this. I will never agree with this.
More than 2 years ago, a new government in Armenia rose to power in a so-called Velvet Revolution, which raised hopes of fundamental democratic reform and a thaw in relations with Azerbaijan over the long-disputed territory Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, the region has been hit by the worst fighting in decades, and a ceasefire remains elusive, with both sides deflecting blame. My guest this week from Yerevan is Armenian Foreign Minister Zohrab Mnatsakanyan. How much responsibility does Armenia bear for the conflict's escalation? Armenian Foreign Minister Zohrab Mnatsakanyan, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you very much.
There is currently fighting in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is governed by ethnic Armenians, but which is recognized as part of Azerbaijan by the international community. Hundreds have already been reported dead. You have been part of talks to broker 2 ceasefires in that regard, and yet the fighting continues. What responsibility does Armenia and the forces in the region which you back bear for the continued fighting?
We have committed ourselves fully to the 2 statements, one in Moscow, the joint statement of the 10th of October, and the second one on the 17th of October, committed fully to respect the ceasefire, to go back to the negotiations and to find a peaceful resolution to this conflict. We have been totally faithful. However, the Azerbaijani side has chosen the path of war. The 2 ceasefires have been violated right away after we have reached an agreement, and there has been no calm on the line of contact and throughout the territory where the conflict is taking place. So we have issued a statement today in which we have reiterated our full commitment to the agreements that we have reached and expressed in those 2 statements.
Mr. Foreign Minister, you say that you're committed, but I would like to put it to you because on Saturday, the Azerbaijani side said that 14 people were killed, 14 people in the city of Ganja, the country's 2nd largest city, in an overnight attack missile by Armenia. You say that you're committed. What is your responsibility?
Now, let me put it again in the context. On the 10th of October at 12 noon, we were supposed to have a ceasefire. We have been, the Nagorno-Karabakh forces have been fully committed to this. We have been restrained. The shelling was continuing. The massive offensive have been continuing. The Nagorno-Karabakh Armenian settlements in Nagorno-Karabakh have been under consistent, constant shelling, air bombing. The rocket launchers, the UAVs have been pounding the cities and villages, the towns and villages in Nagorno-Karabakh excessively. We have by now 38 dead amongst the civilians. We have 116 seriously wounded. We have over 8,000 infrastructure and
you have
property
casualties.
destroyed.
The other side says that they have casualties. The Azerbaijanis say that 60 people have been killed, 270 wounded since the fighting. So I'd just like to ask you, because I'm hearing from you, both sides are accusing each other. They say that you started it. You say that they started it. Either someone or one of you is lying here. It doesn't bode well, does it, for 2 countries who need to sit together and find a peaceful solution to the conflict?
Excellent point you are making about the blame game. This is exactly this devious path that has been chosen to engage in the blame game and to continue with the attacks on the civilians, attacks on the Nagorno-Karabakh consistently. We have been calling for the verification mechanisms for the ceasefire and the verification of the ceasefire mechanisms. If the Armenian sides in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Armenia, are blamed in any way, then let's go ahead, let's do the verification mechanism and be done with it. However, Azerbaijan has been consistently avoiding that, consistently rejecting those proposals, because this is a very convenient way of deception and engaging us into this blame game.
Well, those accusations, as we have been mentioning, have been coming from both sides, Mr. Foreign Minister. So then I would like to ask you the message, ultimately, that has been coming from your side. The message from the Armenian Prime Minister, he said the following in the days after the first ceasefire was agreed. And this is a quote. "At this decisive moment, we will not cave in because this is a fateful war for our people." He added to that, "We will fight till the end, and that end is called a free and happy Nagorno-Karabakh." I'll put it to you because, I mean, this was in the days after the first ceasefire was agreed, and he's talking about fighting to the very end. Is this really a rhetoric that is supposed to build support for a ceasefire, build support for peace?
Look, when you have 30 days, your people, the 3.5 weeks, when your people are under such massive attack, when day after day, every day, you have your people subjected to risks of existential threat, risks of, existence on this earth, when you are fighting for your life, when you have the ceasefire violations consistently upon you, when you have this situation, you are fighting for your life. The Armenian sides, again, I'm emphasizing this with full responsibility. The Armenian sides emphasize the importance of the ceasefire and the verification mechanism. I reiterate strongly the commitment of Armenia to respect the ceasefire, to respect the commitments we have undertaken on the 10th of October and the 17th of October. The Nagorno-Karabakh has also reiterated its support to that. But sitting back and waiting when you are killed, your family is killed, your property is destroyed, you have to understand this is.
But Mr. Foreign Minister, I put it to you
this is
now
everything that this conflict is about. But
because your partner.
Hang on. I want to come back to the very important question that you also raised, and that is the question of the peaceful resolution.
Absolutely, and we are certainly going to talk about that. But before we head there, I would just like to put it to you once more. Russia, your partner with whom you have a defense deal, who has been working very hard at brokering ceasefire agreements, the foreign minister there, Sergei Lavrov, reportedly told you to, quote, halt the provocative warlike rhetoric. So I would just like to ask you once again to give you an opportunity. It seems as if you're not signaling that you're serious about peace, about these negotiations with this type of rhetoric. Will you take responsibility for that? Look,
so far as the rhetoric is concerned, we have been dealing with a rhetoric which is based on the hatred of Armenians, on the encouragement to kill Armenians. We have today cases of beheadings and mutilations of our compatriots in Nagorno-Karabakh fueled by this rhetoric. This is not a new thing. This has been happening for a very long time. We have cases of glorification of murderers of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. What I want to come back to is that I agree very much the rhetoric doesn't help. The rhetoric is fueling poison into this. And the peaceful resolution has absolutely no alternative. This is what we have been so consistent about. When it comes to peaceful resolution, we have been working very consistently, and we have been advocating for a peace resolution of this on the basis of such arrangement in which the interests of all the parties are taken into account. So you acknowledge that the rhetoric is not helpful and that you want to pursue a peaceful solution. Then therefore, I would like to ask you in that context, let's talk about how we got here. And I'd like to go back to more than a year ago. For months, the tension has, in fact, been ratcheted up. And I'd like to go back to something that your prime minister said. This was more than a year ago. He traveled to Nagorno-Karabakh, a region which is disputed, we have to mention, and called for the reunification of Armenia with Karabakh. He said the following: Nagorno-Karabakh is Armenia, and that is that. He also repeatedly led the crowd in chants of unification.
the nationalist slogan that gained popularity in the 1980s and the 1990s as Armenians fought for Karabakh to break away from Azerbaijan. Do you acknowledge that more than a year ago, this was a clear provocation of the other side? If you want peace, why would the Prime Minister travel to Nagorno-Karabakh and say that?
Now, let me come back again to that very point, that the question about Nagorno-Karabakh is the question of their existence, the physical threat that they have been confronting over these many, many years. When the Prime Minister in Armenia was saying this, he was referring specifically to the responsibility of Armenia as the sole guarantor for the physical security of our compatriots, the sole guarantor to look after that security for our compatriots. They defend themselves, but there is no other guarantee apart from Armenia. The Prime Minister, in fact, has been very consistent in his specific approaches concerning the resolution of the conflict. The Prime Minister, in that very same speech, he was referring to the negotiating process and repeating the very basic approaches that Armenia has been promoting as a compromise-based solution which meets the interests of all the parties in that very same speech. However, what we have been dealing with is this deliberate, taking out of context of the statement of the Prime Minister without regard to all other things he has been saying over there and most of the time now.
This comment in particular came from your Prime Minister. We're talking a lot about the language and the rhetoric, and I'd also like to look at the actions that you have been taking. There is a third road currently planned to be constructed through disputed territory from Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh. A number of EU parliamentary committees have condemned the move. This is what they say. The decision to build this highway has been taken without the consent of the competent authorities in Azerbaijan in violation of international law. So these are not just words here. These are real, concrete actions on the part of Armenia and Armenian-supported government in the region. These provocations are not just words, they're actions, aren't they?
Now, let's take another look at it. Let's look at it through another prism. For 30 years now, Azerbaijan has been taking every effort to isolate Nagorno-Karabakh from this world, to isolate any link of Nagorno-Karabakh people from anyone outside their land, blocking anything that might be, referring to the normalcy, normal life in Nagorno-Karabakh, banning every action that the international community might take to, for the people in Nagorno-Karabakh to have a normal life. Now, Nagorno-Karabakh is a land in which people are living. Now we have a situation, where 90,000 people are displaced, 8,000 property and infrastructure is destroyed. There is a humanitarian situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. And what are we having? Are we going to leave them alone? Are we going to disregard the lives of our people?
But that wasn't my question, Mr. Foreign Minister. My question was, do you acknowledge that it is a provocative action that you are taking in the region that the other side interprets as a provocative action?
Excuse me, I am saying this again. What is not provocative? Letting our people strangle in Nagorno-Karabakh? Letting our people in isolation in Nagorno-Karabakh? They are less important than any other people anywhere in the world? Excuse me, I cannot agree with this. I will never agree with this. Our people will not be strangled. They are people like any other people. And this was exactly the policy of Nagorno-Karabakh, to degrade them, to deny them the right to live freely in dignity, to live in safety, and to live in security. And now you're telling me that what we're doing to make sure that they have that opportunity to live a normal life is a provocative action.
Absolutely not. I'm just asking you about a road that you're planning to build in the region that the other side sees as a provocation, Mr. Foreign Minister. Another action that I would like to also ask you about that has also been seen as a provocation from the other side is the following. The fact that there was an election that was held recently. The following transpired in relation to that. At the inauguration in the city of Shusha, which happened to have been overwhelmingly populated by Azerbaijanis prior to the 1992-1994 war, and a key symbol of Azerbaijan's claim to the territory. It aroused apparently considerable anger in Azerbaijan, which was then added to the fact that your prime minister had a presence at the inauguration. Now, the European Union has acknowledged that this election was indeed not valid under legal international standards. Do you acknowledge that this was also provocative?
Again, the European Union didn't put it exactly that way. The European Union acknowledged that Nagorno-Karabakh is a community.
They said in view of the so-called presidential and parliamentary elections in Nagorno-Karabakh, they reiterated that it does not recognize the constitutional and legal framework.
Exactly, the constitutional and legal framework. However, they do not deny for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to organize their life in a democratic way, to elect their representatives, by way of a democratic method. And the claims coming out from Azerbaijan are preposterous, to say the least, in a society which has known nothing but one family rule for since 1960s, and talking about democratic process and denying our people the democratic process and imposing their methods on the people of Nagorno-Karabakh is not going to work.
I'd also like to ask you, because we've talked so much about peace here, I'd like to ask you about where that process stands and your role in all of that, because the international community has really been calling on you for leadership and compromise on this issue. You say that you are working with the OSCE Minsk group, which has been charged with helping to resolve the conflict, but you can't even manage to take action on some of the basic principles that the group put forward more than a decade ago, including returning territories, 7 districts, which are surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan. So I'd like to put it to you, is territory more important to you than peace?
What is most important to us is this, again, let me repeat, the free life in dignity, in safety and security for our people in Nagorno-Karabakh. Therefore, what is most important for us is the status of Nagorno-Karabakh and the security of Nagorno-Karabakh. This has been very consistent position of Armenia, and we continue to work on this basis. And we do have the necessary parameters to work out that compromise in which our interests are met, while at the same time in a measurable balance, the interests of the other party are also met. So it is not territories that is more important for us. This devastation, this pounding of consistent pounding, air bombing and shelling that these people are going through for 3.5 weeks. People are living in shelters. This is happening at a time when COVID is still around in the world. The least that Azerbaijan could care about is about these things. They apparently don't care about.
But back to the peace process, Mr. Foreign Minister.
They're overwhelmed with this choice of a war.
Back to that, and I'd like to ask you, because the former U.S. ambassador to Armenia, Richard Mills, I mean, you say that you are supporting peace in the region. He assessed the situation as follows upon his departure from the country in 2018. He said that it was disturbing how few Armenians were willing to make concessions to Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh. He's quoted as saying, "The harsh reality is that any settlement is going to require the return of some portion of the occupied territories." He doesn't seem to believe that you're serious about it.
Well, I do not agree with the assessment. I do not agree with the assessment of Richard Mills. I would again reiterate and retaliate in saying that I haven't seen any sign of compromise coming out from Azerbaijan. What we have been consistently seeing is the maximalism and this warmongering, hate-infused rhetoric, and no willingness to compromise on the part of Azerbaijan. But let me put that aside. Let me go back again to the question of the compromise. For over these past 2 years, our government has been fully committed to move forward with the peace process.
So then let me ask you, because when your government took power back in 2018, it was the so-called Velvet Revolution. There was so much hope for a thaw in the conflict. And this is how the International Crisis Group assesses the situation. They say that progress seemed palpable, They said that a new government was ready to seek a compromise solution, and that it appeared that the government in Azerbaijan also reciprocated. But then they cited this rhetoric, this tit-for-tat rhetoric that we talked about a bit earlier in our conversation. And so I'd like to put it to you. The bloodshed, the toxic rhetoric from both sides, has it limited your capacity to reach a deal? And did you miss an opportunity to seize on that initial hope? Did you miss your window? Did you overplay your hand?
You know, I think it's a very interesting point you are raising. Look, part of our work over the past 2 years within this OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship was about creating an environment which is conducive to peace. And we have invested a very good effort in that together, by the way, together with Azerbaijan and with Nagorno-Karabakh. We have been working towards such steps which would somehow diffuse, somehow, reduce that tension and that mutual mistrust. We have had a very interesting project implemented in the autumn of 2019 when we exchanged journalists traveling to Baku, to Yerevan, and to Stepanakert. This was a very modest but very important step. It didn't fall apart. And we had full confidence and we had very good understanding on the Armenian side that, we have to invest effort in creating an environment conducive to peace. Now what we see is that it was a futile effort, and this is very, very bad. Now, so far as the opportunities are concerned, look, it is our job, it is our responsibility never to give up, to use every opportunity, every window, no matter how narrow it is, every corridor to walk, because this is a responsibility, because this is about the lives of our people. And we care about the lives of our people. We care about every single life. And now we have so many casualties. I hope that the Azerbaijani side also has such sense of responsibility. We would need to see that demonstrated, and that demonstration would be in this cessation of hostilities, ceasefire, and move on the verification,
and as each side
and move on with the peace
has
process.
A similar message to what you have demonstrated, and as each side, we're waiting to see movements from both sides. Mr. Foreign Minister, I'd like to just put it into the bigger regional picture, because Turkey, a NATO ally, is of course backing Azerbaijan quite forcefully, we have to mention, and pushing for a military solution here. You have a defense deal with Russia, as we know, but so far they have been relatively neutral. Are you short on friends right now?
We are never short of friends. But the very important point you raised is about the major spoiler, Turkey. Turkey has been the destabilizing force in this situation. We have been warning about this consistently. We have been seeing these destabilizing, aggressive policies in every direction of the neighborhood of Turkey. East Mediterranean, North Africa, Middle East, and we were absolutely cognizant about the risks of exporting these destabilizing policies in our region. We have been seeing the signs of it when there was a transfer of military equipment to Azerbaijan, when there was a transfer of foreign terrorist fighters recruited in the parts of Syria controlled by Turkey.
But Mr. Foreign Minister, my question to you was about
what Azerbaijan has done is absolutely crazy.
My question to you,
absolutely crazy that Azerbaijan today is a terrorist hub.
My question to you is about whether you see the risk of being isolated in the region, because the European Council on Foreign Relations, there was an assessment in the following way. They say that Russia's rather neutral reaction to recent clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan reflects exacerbation, with its allies' inflexibility in negotiations. There's a perception in Moscow that in the last 2 decades, the balance of power has shifted in favor of Azerbaijan, and that instead of adhering to a more or less acceptable deal, Armenia has been unreasonable and uncompromising. Russia does not want to pick up the geopolitical tab for that. Are you afraid of being isolated?
Well, that is an assessment. That is an assessment that I wouldn't agree with. Look, we have the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairmanship, of which Russia is a responsible member. We have our allied relations with Russia, and we have many other partnerships in the world. Now, the point here is that We have been consistent about the cessation of hostilities and consistent about the work that has been done personally by President Putin on the 10th of October, personally by President Macron on the 17th of October. This has to happen. So intransigence of Armenia is not something I can agree with. The defense of the Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh by the Karabakh forces and the support of Armenia is something that, as I was saying, is about basic defense of human lives in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Right.
But again, how many times do I have to say? There is no alternative to the peaceful resolution.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Armenian Foreign Minister Zohrab Mnatsakanyan, for joining us on Conflict Zone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.